وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Your Highness, Professor Dr. Murad, American, our professors, doctors, our brothers and sisters, those who are in the Zoom and also the Stack YouTube channel, and those who are here at Ibn Khaldun conference room, welcome to this, I can say, new series of focused lectures on Ibn Khaldun, Abdul Rahman Ibn Khaldun. This is also, brothers and sisters, if I may say, especially to our postgraduate student here, master, PhD, and the lecturers, the researchers who are following, whether here or on the Zoom. This is today also another lesson for us here to learn. I really wanted to appreciate the presence of Her Highness here, even though she is our student here, doing master here, but she has a lot of other commitment. But when Professor Murad, her supervisor, asked her to come for the lecture, she is with us today and on time. So, brothers and sisters, I always take these opportunities. We are really learning here. So I hope, inshallah, to make all our lectures and series and intellectual discourse programs really take them as something very important, very precious. You know, to invite a scholar to speak is something great and important. So it's really an honor to have her here and also all of you. I would like to thank also Professor Murad. In fact, last 2 months, we were having a discussion on improving on the programs of ISTAC, the intellectual environment. That's why I asked Professor Murad to introduce this series about Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun is one of the great scholars of Islam. And for our student at ISTAC here, to read Ibn Khaldun and the Muqaddimah, the introduction of Ibn Khaldun, and to read Imam al-Ghazali, and to read al-Farabi, and to read these great scholars, it's something great to do. It will help you. And I think starting by Ibn Khaldun is really something great. And I hope all students at ISTAC here, Master and PhD, they have their own readings of the great scholars of Islam. And Alhamdulillah, Prof. Murad is an expert on Ibn Khaldun, and he will initiate and start this lecture on Ibn Khaldun's thought, methodology, ideas, and their relevance to our time, and how we will build up on them. I think Prof. Murad planned a series of lectures on Ibn Khaldun thought, and he is starting it. And if I'm not mistaken, he invited me in the next few months to give one of these lectures about Ibn Khaldun. So I think without any further delay, we ask Professor Murad to go for his presentation on Ibn Khaldun as one of the great scholars of the Ummah, who was, I can say, a system builder. He's a great thinker. He introduced what you know today as social sciences and human sciences during his time. You know, economy, politics, sociology, anthropology, geography. I think Prof. Murad will be explaining to you, brothers and sisters. Murad, you go ahead.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Prof. Aziz, for your kind and generous introduction and allowing this lecture and series to happen. We're indeed honored to have the presence of Tunku Puan Pahang. She wants to be treated as a student, and we welcome Tunku Puan. I'm honored. Yeah. Yeah, no rest and no jet lag. And thank you to all of you here present in this room. and those who are present online. There are a few things that we are going to do in this 1.5 hours as the initial lecture on Ibn Khaldun. First of all, I want to remind us that if you're not aware that we are in the Ibn Khaldun conference room. That is one. And second, which I just realized that yesterday is the birthday of Ibn Khaldun, 27th May, 1332. So we indeed fortuitous to discuss about the great thinker, the great man, the great personality, the great philosopher that has given the world, a new science of society, a new worldview, a new way of looking at ourselves. The rationale for having this session is not only to discuss Ibn Khaldun, but also there was a need. First of all, I want to explain to you a need for us to look into the classical Muslim literature. I realized this when about 6 years ago when I joined this university, and I was talking to a few professors from the other kuliah. I realized that if we want to promote an Islamic worldview, if we want to cultivate a worldview that is isolated from the default system that we have now, then we have to go to the classic texts. What I discovered is that this is one of my criticisms, which I will later elaborate, is that we have denied, we have marginalized, we have been ignorant of the classical Muslim thinkers in our universities. I know that this is not the first time Ibn Khaldun is discussed in Malaysia. Okay? Over the last few years, we find a number of series of lectures about Ibn Khaldun, basically the Muqaddimah, introducing the Muqaddimah, discussing the Muqaddimah, one of which by a professor in UKM, Said Yahya, and a few others. I also discovered that many years back, the Dean of ISTEC, Professor Mahmud Zuhdi, also had sessions on the reading of the Muqaddimah in ISTEC. That was about 15, 20 years ago. I'm quite aware that the Muqaddimah is also used in the Usul Fiqh realm in universities in Malaysia within the context of Islamic studies. But my point is this. The Muqaddimah Ibn Khaldun is not discussed within the context of modern social science and modern philosophy. It is not integral to the study of sociology, for example. It's not integral to the study of economics, political science, communication, anthropology, and so on. It is not integral to, it's not seen to be part of the modern corpus. It is not seen to be part of the modern knowledge production system. It is relegated to Islamic studies. So again, here it will be suggestive to look into this corpus, not only Ibn Khaldun, but what we have in mind in this text will be later interspersed with this, will be works of Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni's Indica. I read Al-Biruni when I was doing my political science in the University of Minnesota. I was doing a course on the South Asian politics, government politics, and in that course, South Asian government politics, we have to read Al-Biruni's Indica. In other words, the work that Al-Biruni used, Al-Biruni produced about India, his knowledge about India, how he developed an ethnography of India, east of the river Indus, Hindustan, Indus. The Hindus refer to those who live in the east of the river Indus. It does not refer to a religion. It refers to the people in that land. It's Hindustan, land of the Hindus, referring to the Indus, not referring to the religion of Hinduism. So again, Al-Biruni provides us with premises and assumptions in what we call anthropology, ethnography, in also the different methodologies. If you want to study society, for example, one would have to look at how Al-Biruni studied the society in India. So apart from Ibn Khaldun, Al-Biruni, also we would have Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd and Al-Ghazali, of course. So these works must be discussed and debated in the context integral to the modern knowledge production system, in the context of modern social science. In other words, what one can expect is that a typical social science or sociology department in in our universities would have a course, a singular course, say for example on Ibn Khaldun, 3 credit hours, a singular course on Al-Biruni, 3 credit hours at undergraduate and postgraduate level, a singular course on Al-Farabi or Ibn Rushd, not to look at them or a cluster of them in the context of Islamic history and civilization, not to look at a cluster of them from the context of the study of societies, but to study them by themselves, of themselves, using their corpus, for example, using the Muqaddimah as a text, meaning as a primary reading material, not reference or not some kind of remote kind of corpus. It's a text. This is the Muqaddimah, 3-volume text, 6 chapters. I think you're a scholar, Professor. I'm not a scholar of Ibn Khaldun. I've dabbled into Ibn Khaldun in the last 30 years, but I'm not a scholar. But this is what I got from the Al-Atas library. I will go through. Of course, not today, but whatever we can. So in other words, these texts, these books become textbooks. The idea of textbooks. When you talk about registering yourself into a course, and when you talk about the readings in the course, you are going through a religion. In order to go through and graduate from the religion, you have to read the text of that religion. In order to be Muslim, you have to read the Quran. So in order to be a person who is knowledgeable and literate about Ibn Khaldun, you have to read the Muqaddimah. But the system does not allow us to read the Muqaddimah because we do not have it as a text. All universities in Malaysia do not have this. Most universities in America and Western Europe do have. They are not Muslim universities, but they have. I was exposed to this system when I was in the College of Liberal Arts in Minnesota. That's when I read Al-Biruni's Indica, but I did not read Ibn Khaldun. Okay? In other words, the text, although I read about Ibn Khaldun. So again, this is my criticism in terms of why we are doing this today. And this session, which we planned for actually 1 year, but it will be more than a year. Perhaps it will be ad infinitum until we finish reading Ibn Khaldun. The thing is that we have heard, you see, why Ibn Khaldun? Ibn Khaldun is the most popular figure in the West and in the world. He's the darling of the West. The West loves to study Ibn Khaldun as compared to the others, Al-Farabi, Al-Biruni, Ibn Sina, but Ibn Khaldun is a most popular figure. And there's so much work written about Ibn Khaldun. There are many translations, but most of us only read what people say about Ibn Khaldun. I also do that. Okay? My first dabbling into Ibn Khaldun was about 30 years ago. I integrated Ibn Khaldun in my thesis in an attempt to integrate the works of some of these thinkers as part of the social sciences communication curricula and corpus. This was in the late 1990s, and I've included this in my book, page 157, on Ibn Khaldun and Al-Farabi and Toshiku Tsutsu, the first in the world to suggest the integration of such works into the corpus of communication. And in 2022, I published 2 works on Ibn Khaldun. One is in Al-Shajarah, on looking into one of the finest biographies I've read about Ibn Khaldun by Robert Irwin. And the other is a book chapter, a handbook, a global handbook published on Asian global intervention. That chapter is about Ibn Khaldun and how Ibn Khaldun is part of the production of a new science before the idea of a new science came out in Europe. For example, Francis Bacon, Gambetta Vico, these are the people after Ibn Khaldun who has written about the new science. But Ibn Khaldun was earlier. Yet Ibn Khaldun was accused of anticipatory plagiarism. You may have heard the word anticipatory plagiarism. In other words, the West accused Ibn Khaldun of plagiarizing their contemporary historians and thinkers. This is just ridiculous. Toynbee, Spengler, and many others, and the people in Europe in the 1930s, 40s, they accused Ibn Khaldun of plagiarism, whereas they are the ones who plagiarized Ibn Khaldun. And that has created a mark, an impression upon some of our students in terms of not knowing how to think clearly. Who comes first? How should we frame? Should we frame Spengler and Toynbee? Spengler's famous work on the rise and decline of the West is actually inspired by Ibn Khaldun. Toynbee's idea of crisis in civilization inspired by Ibn Khaldun, but they accuse Ibn Khaldun of being inspired by the modern thinkers, including Hegel. So again, this is where I think we have to put our perspective correct in terms of how we place Ibn Khaldun in the 15th century. Ibn Khaldun was born in 1332 and he died in 1406. In preparing for this series, I have referred to a number of works, but I was searching for this, so I got this from the library. Now, in the Al-Atas library, you look at the, I don't know whether any of you have done this, but you'll find some 84 titles from the Al-Atas library, 84 titles of works by and about Ibn Khaldun. 3 is, I think 4. 4 will be a set of Muqaddimah. Sorry, 4. 4, a set of Muqaddimah, all by the Bollingen series foundation that publishes Muqaddimah in the 1950s, 58, 57. And 1, an abridged version by Sheikh Dawood, also translated by Franz Rosenthal. Franz Rosenthal is the greatest, well, a great translator from Arabic of Ibn Khaldun. So in the Al-Atas library, you have 3 sets of these, and you can see there in the picture, 2 more sets there. And I deliberately set it against the background of a rug. That's that rug I bought in Morocco. It's where that was the geographical and historical area of Ibn Khaldun. So I bought some rugs in Rabat, resonating the Khaldunian aesthetics. And there was one rug, quite big, I think 8 by 10, so all handwoven. These are Berber rugs. And when I asked the seller, he said that these are Berber rugs, but what do you call it? Adorned by aesthetics of Picasso. So again, this is an analogy which I want to sort of resonate the Muqaddimah. When we see a rug, for example, I mean, I'm a poor collector of carpets, hand-woven carpets. Recently, I bought a piece in Isfahan. I bought some in Morocco. And 20 years back, I was in the carpet shop in KL. And I was looking for a Caucasian rug. And suddenly there was one, I was told. It was not a big one. What I was to buy, I thought it's a genuine one. The seller says, no, this is not a genuine one. This is, although hand-woven, but it's not a genuine Caucasian rug. It was woven in, I think, near the areas of Azerbaijan and Armenia. But they cannot find a genuine, authentic Caucasian rug anymore. But the design is Caucasian, it's hand-woven. The same thing in how we understand the Muqaddimah. What we see materially is an authentic we say authentic, translated, written corpus of the Muqaddimah. How we engage with the Muqaddimah is another thing. The Muqaddimah was written in the 1400. It was completed in 1377. Aziz, you are a scholar. Yeah, you have read. I mean, he is also Ibn Aziz is a scholar. I have to share with you, a scholar Ibn Khaldun. So it was completed in the 14th century. What Ibn Khaldun wrote was what he saw, how he engaged in, and how he participated in the life in North Africa. Now, this guy is quite a maverick. Actually, he's a scholar, he's a politician, he's a qadi, he's a philosopher, he was a prisoner, he was in prison. So he's quite a maverick, and he moved around from the Maghreb to Egypt. He was born in Tunis. He died in Cairo. So we read his works. I'm not going to go through his life, but you find that this guy is everything. It seems like he wants to write about everything. He wants to do everything, and perhaps he wants to write about himself. And his audience is himself. You were to read this again. So this is what the gem in Ibn Khaldun. But he was writing, and what he was seeing is society at that time. Society which is in what we call North Africa, engagement with the Mongols, and just across the Mediterranean is Europe. Some people tell me that he has ignored Europe. He was ignorant of the Mediterranean. Then we look back, yeah, but he mentioned about the Mediterranean. He looked at society, and he looked about how he observed well, I want to mention three words: the Badawi, the Hadari, and the Madani. All three things, all three states of existence are in the Muqaddimah. He did not mention on the Hadari so much, but he mentioned on the Badawi. So you need a Badawi also to move into the Hadari. So when you engage in Ibn Khaldun, we may look at him as, some people say he is a philosopher, a proto-sociologist. That's, I think, most Europeans would describe himself as a proto-sociologist. As a thinker, as a historian, as an economist, also as a Sufi. There's a chapter on Sufism. And from the Eurocentric view, he would be described as a pre-modern scholar. But then I think we need to look at him as a modern scholar. The founder of sociology. Of course, the French would not agree with us. They would say the French founded sociology. Henry Saint-Simon and others. Viscount Montesquieu. And the French were the ones who called it social physics. And the Western Europeans, the Anglo-Saxons, they say, no, we have Francis Bacon, who founded modern science and the way of looking at the world. The Italians will say that we have Gambetta Vico, whom Edward Said was giving his appraisal in Orientalism, 1978. A new way of looking at the world. Essentially, we're talking about phases in modern history of a new way of looking at the world. Bacon was one who initiated this perhaps in the 1500s. Novum Organum, a new science. And then Vico, to look at a new world. Vico was, I think, just after, all these were just after Ibn Khaldun. But looking at the modern world, early on, 1400, was Ibn Khaldun. Not only the father of modern science, the father of a new science of society. And this is what I've pushed the idea to the publication in the who published it in 2022, Routledge in London and Colorado, of how we can use Ibn Khaldun as an intervention to the present Eurocentric view of the world. So here we have to see Ibn Khaldun in the modern light. But of course, ideas change and evolve. The idea in Ibn Khaldun stays, but how we look at these ideas would have evolved because we are living in a system that has defaults. Figures like Ibn Khaldun and Al-Biruni, I think Al-Biruni was 11th, 12th century, and the rest. There was no default, no dominant system at that time. So if we're talking about an Islamic worldview, if we're talking about a de-Westernized worldview, one of the best books to read is the works before the 1500. They were not thinking, they were not grappling with how we should move away from Westernized knowledge, how we should move away from positivism, how we should move away from not recognizing revealed knowledge. But here, after the 1500, we have to grapple with positivism, we have to grapple with Eurocentrism, we have to grapple with Orientalism, we have to grapple with the despiritualization of knowledge, the crisis in the revealed knowledge system. And therefore, hence, we have this project of Tawhidic epistemology. But before that, we have the Westernization of knowledge, Islamization of knowledge, and so on. But the works before that do not have to deal with that. So this is how we can see the perspective of Ibn Khaldun and how we engage Ibn Khaldun in the modern light. And we engage Ibn Khaldun in the modern light in terms of object and subject. No, it's not only looking at Ibn Khaldun as our subject, but we are also the subject. Because we are linked to Ibn Khaldun and we are integral, or we are part, or we are influenced by the dominant system that Ibn Khaldun anticipated at that time. So this is how I think we have to see Ibn Khaldun in terms of the past and the present. Now, having said that, I want to touch a bit on the autobiography of Ibn Khaldun. We know that Muqaddimah was written over a period of time. He at one time Ibn Khaldun isolated himself, and finally it was completed in 1377. But who is Ibn Khaldun? Briefly, later on as we go along, I think we can discuss more. In his autobiography, he says, "My name is Abdul Rahman bin Muhammad bin Al Hassan bin Muhammad bin Jabir bin Muhammad bin Ibrahim bin Abdul Rahman bin Khaldun." This is how he has introduced himself. And these are the first few lines in his autobiography. At the very outset, the critical mind of the scholar was at work when he expresses doubt over the accuracy of his family tree. He reasons that if his ancestors had migrated to Andalusia during the time of the Arab conquest, he came from the Hadramaut. His family migrated to Andalusia. There should be at least 20 generations between him and the first Khaldun. 20 generations. He arrived at the figure of 20 by counting 3 generations per century, according to the method established in the first book of the Ibar. Now, there are many terms used. The Muqaddimah. What is the Muqaddimah? The Muqaddimah perhaps is not one book, but 2 books. Yeah, this whole thing is the Muqaddimah. But part of it is also the Muqaddimah. Okay? So here in one of the earliest parts of the Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun talks about history. And one of my first exposure to Ibn Khaldun was about history. Linking history to how we collate and how we come to terms with information. I'll just go through a bit. Much of what is known about Ibn Khaldun's personal and family history comes from his autobiography. It is often the case that an author's family background and personal experience are major influences on his perspective and outlook. This is surely true of Ibn Khaldun. The vocations, his ancestors, and his own experience of the uncertainty and vicissitudes of political life helped to form his understanding of the nature of historical change. There was one incident in which Ibn Khaldun went back to Andalusia, trying to retrieve his property. What happened was that he was asked to be a Christian, has to be a convert. This was, I think, in the 1300s, during the time of the crisis in the Roque Costero. But then he left. So he did not take the he left Andalusia and went back to North Africa. So the house of Khaldun, Banu Khaldun, traces its origins to Seville in Andalusia. If you have to go to I think Alhambra, I think you will pass through Seville. Sevilla. Ibn Khaldun's ancestors migrated to Tunis about the middle of the 7th or 13th century, following the victory of Ferdinand III, the son of Alfonso, king of Galicia, during the Reconquista. An ancestor by the name of Khaldun, from whom the family derives its name, was the first to set foot in Andalusia. Way back in time, the Khalduns trace the origins to an Arab Yemeni tribe from the Hadramaut region. So this is where Ibn Khaldun originated, where he came from. In my writing in the Our Sajarah, I would share with you. This was published in 2022. About the intricacies of Ibn Khaldun, the personal intricacies, and my commentaries about the absence of the Khaldunian corpus in Malaysia. And I read this author, Robert Irwin. He's a fellow, I think, at Oxford. He said the study of Ibn Khaldun has intensified over the decades. In part, this may be because of the hunger of knowledge by modern scholars, the hunger of knowledge by political scientists, sociologists, anthropologists, ethnologists, and economists as to the intellectual ancestor. And much of it is happening in the West. So they realize that their intellectual ancestor, by those non-Muslim scholars, is Ibn Khaldun. Much of the time, we follow them. Now, we follow our non-Muslim scholars in saying that, yeah, we also follow Ibn Khaldun. But actually, we are not. We are still isolating Ibn Khaldun from the mainstream corpus. We are not doing justice to the man and the Muqaddimah. But Irwin says that there is a certain movement and what he described as ancestor worship. He was criticizing the scholars in the West. But he acknowledged that Ibn Khaldun's thinking was, although it's 693 years ago, his birthday was yesterday, but that thinking is similar and different from us. So who was Ibn Khaldun? Who was he writing for? It is not likely that when Ibn Khaldun was writing, it was unlikely that he was having an audience or a reader in mind. People don't read at that time in 14th century Africa. So most probably he was writing for himself. And a trait of Ibn Khaldun is that he was suspicious of people. He was suspicious of merchants, shopkeepers that he met. he was suspicious of the Arabs and the Berbers. He was an Arab living among the Berbers. North Africa is a Berber country. You go to Casablanca, you go to Marrakesh, you find a different culture altogether. And there are many types of Berbers, about 5 or 6 Berbers. You can find Berber alphabet in Morocco, I think in Tunisia and Morocco especially. And they, to the Arabs, they are a nuisance. And to them, the Arabs are, well, Aziz is not here, Arabs are colonizers. Yeah, he's Algerian. Yeah, true, but a very complex history. And Ibn Khaldun lived in this complex history of the indigenous population and the Arabs who were seen as conquerors of North Africa. Now, the Muqaddimah was popular, and the Muqaddimah has some early admirers when the Muqaddimah was completed. It was the Turks, Dr. Mehmet is here. The Turks were admirers, the Ottoman Turks were admirers of the Muqaddimah. And because he wrote and finished in Egypt, so Egypt was under the Ottomans and the Mamluk at that time. And later, the Muqaddimah was seen to be part of a global history, a universal history written by Ibn Khaldun. It was the West who first discovered the Muqaddimah. It was not. It was discovered between the 17th and the 18th centuries. One was by the Austrian scholar and translator Joseph von Hammerspoxtel, who called Ibn Khaldun as the Arab Montesquieu. As we know, Montesquieu and Robespierre and Saint-Simon were the early philosophers and the sociologists in France. So they liken the Europeans would put the image of Ibn Khaldun as a French, the Arab Montesquieu, or the French Montesquieu is known as the European Ibn Khaldun. Arab intellectuals belatedly rediscovered Ibn Khaldun in the 19th and 20th century. It was for a reason. The rediscovery of Ibn Khaldun by Arab intellectuals was only in the 19th, 20th century, made possible by European publications. Significantly, the Muqaddimah can be seen as a Western cultural re-export to the Arab world. Western cultural re-export to the Arab world. Arab discovery or Arab rediscovery of Ibn Khaldun is part of the background to the Nahda, the awakening, or Arab Renaissance of the 19th and 20th century. And this is an important moment, not only in the Arab world, but also in the Malay archipelago. See, in the Malay archipelago in the 1900s, early 20th century, we also have the Nahda, the Arab awakening, due to the assimilation or to the settlement of the Hadramis in the Malay archipelago, in East Indies and Malaysia. And there were about 150 Hadrami newspapers in this part of the world. Okay? I think more than 100 plus were Arab language newspapers in the Malay archipelago, and the rest were Bahasa Melayu newspapers, and maybe 1 or 2 in English. But these were important in how the Hadramis in the Malay archipelago negotiate their identity. Part of it was resolved in the Sumpah Pemuda 1928 when they were asked to take an oath on where their allegiance lie, whether to Indonesia or to Hadramaut. And they chose to be loyal to Indonesia. This was the grandfather of Anies Baswedan, the one who lost the election to president. Yeah, his grandfather was Abrahman Baswedan. His grandfather was a diplomat and editor. His grandfather led the oath of the Hadramis in Indonesia. So there was this Nahda, and this Nahda also includes the Muqaddimah. The cultural revival grew variously upon secularism, nationalism, and Islamic revivalism in the Arab world, as well as in the Malay archipelago, mainly Malaya and the East Indies. And it was part of a reaction to European colonialism. So we look at the relevance of Ibn Khaldun and the relevance of the Muqaddimah, you'll find that if you stretch that from the 13th century, 14th century to the present, you'll see a certain kind of contemporariness. And this is what we're looking for. It is this contemporariness of the ideas behind the Muqaddimah that we want to look at, and which is relevant to us both as scholars and as a population, as a member of our society, mainly as scholars, because in terms of scholarship, we're losing much if we do not engage in what the Muqaddimah has. So it is, this is what I've said, the Muqaddimah would have to be given its rightful and proper place in the modern campus in Malaysia. Okay? I'm not talking about in Western Europe or in America, but in Malaysia. Okay? We proclaim the significance of Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah to knowledge, society, and civilization, because we're talking about civilization. What more, over the last few years, the subject of civilization is important. And now we are facing a situation of the crisis of civilization, the decline of civilization. Perhaps picking up from Oswald Spengler in the early 1900s, and picking up from perhaps Hegel, dialectics of history, and Spengler, and now against October 7, against what I think I want to repeat, Romel was here that day, the problem of anti-civilization. How the structures and the values of civilization is crumbling, is collapsing. Now we are living in an age of anti-civilization. Now, anti-civilization has many meanings. Anti-civilization is not does not mean the concept of criticizing another concept of civilization, or criticizing modernity, or criticizing industrialization. But we are talking about the whole corpus of civilization. The act of civilization is collapsing. The killing and massacre of people indicates the collapse of civilization. And when you talk about Europe, when you talk about European civilization, it is a misnomer. It is a contradiction in terms, because after October 7, there's no such thing as European civilization. There's European barbarism and savagery. There's all the universities in Europe are not upholding to the values of civilization. Scholarship in Europe has collapsed. And last year, 2 years back, one of the foremost philosophers in Europe, Jürgen Habermas, a German philosopher, I was his admirer for decades. But he made a statement that he supports the genocide in Gaza. And I made a statement in my column to condemn him. I said I was disappointed. So this is where I think the shades, the sinews, and the soul of European civilization is gone. They have gone against their rationality. They have gone against rationalism. They have gone against reason. So the canon that was upheld by Montesquieu, Rousseau, and so on, by the French philosophers, are all collapsing. The textbooks that they hold in terms of objectivity, in terms of the separation of facts from values, cannot hold anymore. They have no right to speak about the production of knowledge. They have no right to speak about sociology. They have no right to speak about civilization. So this is where we are in a situation that, that we can call it anti-civilization. So, but here we have not integrated the Muqaddimah as a course or text in the various social science disciplines, even in economics and culture, Sufism. Ibn Khaldun talked also about dreams. Very interesting. The social science corpus has been silent on his perspective in scholarship. Social science in Malaysia, for example, has certainly made reference to him, but only to studies on civilization and the usul fiqh type. and even providing a hagiographic narrative, as if he is beyond criticism. No, he is like any other scholar. We can criticize him. We can deliberate on the shortcomings of his argument. But in a certain context, we can be critical of a scholar, and like any other scholar. But he has not been located as providing an alternative form of knowledge, and certainly far from critically examining his magnum opus. This is what we're doing now. Not today. Okay? We go and start today, but this is what we're doing now for the next perhaps 12 months. Interspersed with Professor Aziz, and there's another professor here who did his, I have to mention him, Professor Zaid Ahmad. He did his thesis on the, I think, book chapter 6 or 7 of Muqaddimah on epistemology. He was from UPM, and then he went to UKM, and now he's in the UIA, Department of History and Civilization. So he'll also be invited to talk about that aspect of Ibn Khaldun. So to examine his magnum opus, political and intellectual climate that he thrived on, the rhetoric of Ibn Khaldun has made pale reference to societal experience outside the realm of the desert and of mainstream social science. We are uncertain of how to theorize his knowledge and how to theorize society based on what he has written. So what I'm going to do over the next part, in about maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes, I'm going to read out, being faithful to the text I have. Although I have a copy, made a photocopy of it, but I deliberately chose this. This is, you can, yeah, of course. We can download it. Yeah, it's in PDF. There are many sites. Okay? The Boligen series, yes. True. Yeah, I forgot. I'm not, I'm not a digital man. I have problems with PDF. I cannot smell the paper. Yeah. I got somebody to print out from that. But this is fragile. I think there needs to be some treatment of the paper. Now, this is volume 1, Muqaddimah, translated from the Arabic by Franz Rosenthal. So this is volume 1. Rosenthal is a Jewish scholar. I'm actually, yeah, German Jew, yeah. And the Boligen Foundation is a Swiss foundation. It operates along lines of university presses. They publish many things, so they are generous enough to publish this. I think there are 2 publications. So I'm going to refer to you to the English version. I don't know Arabic. Professor knows. In the frontispiece, repeat cover, you have the map of the world, and then you have that, Ibn Khaldun Muqaddimah, and Introduction to History, translated from the Arabic by Franz Rosenthal in 3 volumes. Boligen series number 27, I think, and Penton Books. There are 2 university publishers. One is Penton Books, the other is Princeton Publications. This is published in 1958. Okay. What this has, just listen, I don't have, actually, I'm not a PowerPoint man too, because I think PowerPoint obliterates understanding. At that time, when Ibn Khaldun, when his books were read, it was auditory. It was oral history. It was oral, O-R-A-L, and oral, A-U-R-A-L. It was orality and orality. It was not visual. Because when you have visual and oral, it obliterates our understanding. So again, just to show you the visuals and some aesthetics there, I'll go through the contents of the Muqaddimah. Volume 1, okay, of this series, Boligen series, Rosenthal, translator's introduction, Ibn Khaldun's life, the Muqaddimah, textual history of the Muqaddimah, and the Muqaddimah. the introduction and book 1 of the world history entitled Kitab al-Ibar. Okay? Kitab al-Ibar is the Muqaddimah itself is maybe about 60 pages. But Kitab al-Ibar is the whole thing. Some people say that nobody could have written such a voluminous work as Ibn Khaldun. It takes a lifetime to do this. So we have invocation, forward, and introduction. I'll afterwards read through actually what Ibn Khaldun has written, introduction, and preliminary remarks. Now, there are several chapters throughout the 3 volumes. These 3 volumes is not published as according to chapter. It goes on continuously, but for convenience of the publication, it is divided into 3 chapters. You have chapter 1. This 3 chapter is by Rosenthal, but the Muqaddimah has several chapters spread over. Chapter 1 is on human civilization in general. It's very pertinent now for us to speak about human civilization. Right? Chapter 1 is on human civilization, and here you have several discussions. Chapter 2, Bedouin civilization, savage nations and tribes, and their conditions of life, including several basic and explanatory statements. Again, if we look at the term civilization, human civilization, chapter 1, and chapter 2, Bedouin civilization, the Badawi, the Badawi, which later becomes the Hadari, and which later in our contemporary political life in Malaysia, we talk about the Madani. And savage nations. Savage. It's not just savagery as in what Ibn Khaldun saw, but savagery in modern times. And tribes and the conditions of life, including several basic and spiritual. Yes, it relates to Asabiyah, it relates to genocide. The definition of genocide, by implication, is very relevant to the Muqaddimah. You're talking about the extermination of a people. You're talking about another form of Asabiyah. Of course, people still debate what is Asabiyah. Some people say haram. I mean, there's a fatwa somewhere. I don't know. Asabiyah is haram. But again, they have not read. I don't know. I'm not saying that for them to read. But again, you have to know the different contexts in terms of how we classify human beings. There's so many classifications and taxonomy and categories in sociology. So that's chapter 2. Chapter 3, on dynasties, royal authority, the caliphate, government ranks, and all that goes with these things. The chapter contains basic and supplementary propositions. These are all words of Ibn Khaldun. On dynasties, royal authority, and the caliphate. Good for those who are into political science and government. Hukum Kanun also, governance, statesmanship. Okay, chapter 3. Chapter 4, he talks about countries and cities and all other forms of sedentary civilization. Very interesting. The conditions occurring there, primary and secondary considerations in this connection. Those who are studying architecture, urban planning, town planning, he talks about countries and countries and cities is one corpus by itself. There are many discourses about cities. In the Naqib Al-Atta's Islam and Secularism, in chapter 1, he quoted Harvey Cox, who talks about the city of God. Harvard theologian. A very, very important conception of the soul of the city. Why the city? What is the city? How is the city different from other forms of human habitation? So all these things are not separate from what we study. Because all what we study is also conditioned upon the environment. And this is much written and talked about of Ibn Khaldun. He talked about the environment. When I talk about the environment, I don't mean crocodiles, tigers, and elephants, or coconut trees. The environment is the built environment as well as natural environment. The atmosphere, the eclim that we're studying now, that's the environment. The climate, the vegetation, that's the environment. The built environment, this is the built environment. When you step into ISTAC, you're entering into a built environment of the Alhambra, although it's not exactly the Alhambra, but you're inspired by it. And Ibn Khaldun talks about how the built environment shapes our behavior. And this is one of the things that I'm doing. Actually, I have in 1986, when I was in Minnesota, there was this uncanny statement made by my professor while I was living. He said many times, but it was the last time he said, American, he calls him American. He's a true blue American. True blue American, he's a Trump American, actually. But I don't know why he becomes my supervisor. He said, American, one day I want you to write about how man is influenced by the climate. Oh, I look at him, okay, without any context, without any resonance of the significance of what he's saying. But after some years, I realized that when I read Ibn Khaldun, and when I went through the literature that I've written, it's about how the environment shapes human behavior. We are creatures of the environment. And when you talk about environment, you talk about equatorial tropical climate in its natural environment, which is different from the desert environment. And that made me arrive at the theory of Tanah Air, actually. No? My lecture on Tanah Air, my book on Tanah Air, actually it has resonance on what my professor said and the iktibar of what Ibn Khaldun says. In Ibn Khaldun, in the Muqaddimah, he said that Arab civilization is shaped by the desert. The reservoir of Arab civilization is the desert. He did not say Islamic civilization. He said Arab civilization. Okay? And he knows what he's saying. Arab civilization, the reservoir of Arab civilization is the desert. By comparison, by analogy, the reservoir of Malay civilization is the Tanah Air. The fluidity of the water is not just statements, but it is comparing the behavior and the worldview of the Malay and the Arab. The Arab that Ibn Khaldun studied will be analogous to continental civilizations, the landlocked, land-based civilization of Eurasia. Again, an important geopolitical historical site that some of you may want, you're studying international relations, yeah, that you may want to include how continental environments create a behavior that determines international relations. How China, for example, we don't understand China. How China is insisting on its 9-9 across the South China Sea. We don't understand. We thought that China is just playing the fool with us. No, it is in the psyche of Chinese history. Earlier on, it was 11-9, but they have resolved it over the Bay of Tonkin with Vietnam. So it's 9-9. But why not a straight line? Why dash and dot? Why dash and dot? Because the 9-9, it has to do with China's resistance against the West. It has to do with China's resistance against the Westphalian nation state, 1648. It has to do with China's Confucianist philosophy. It has to do with China's philosophy of one cannot step on the same river twice. One cannot step on the same river twice. Some people say that's from Confucius, some people say that's from Aristotle. I'm not too sure. But why dash and dot? Because dash and dot is on water. If it's on land, it's dash, the border. But because it is on water, from Hainan right across maybe about 20 kilometers from the borders of Sabah and Sarawak and to Spratly and so on. So water does not remain the same. Water moves. So the philosophy, the Confucius philosophy that was promulgated by the Chinese scientists who created this in 1940s he created this 9 dash and dot. So this is, again, the Chinese blending of continental environment to the oceanic environment. So again, there is a difference. In other words, the Arab environment, the Eurasian environment, and the fluidity of the oceanic environment. So in Malaysia, in the Malay archipelago, it's called tanah air, which is the opposite of continental in terms of civilization, in terms of built environment, in terms of psyche, in terms of this intricacies of behavior. And I was studying. I mean, I'm a Malay identity. Tuanku may call me a mama. I'm a Malay, social-wise and cultural-wise. I see myself from a Malay perspective. But when I engage myself with the Europeans or the Arabs, I sense the difference in a positive way. I mean, a collective, objective difference among peoples. And these are deep differences. These are not created differences. These are differences which are actually embedded historically, genealogically, geographically. It's also a material difference in terms of how we think, the psyche. Yeah. Oh yeah. But think of the psyche. The psyche is important in terms of all of us have a psyche. And one of my favorite things is to study the Malay psyche. You don't understand the Malay psyche, then we don't understand ourselves. Now I'm studying the Chinese psyche. I'm studying works about China. How the Chinese see the world. How China sees the world. And this is the age of China. The default way is China, not America anymore. So you have to understand China. Okay, this chapter 4. And then chapter 4. Chapter 5. Chapter 5, yeah. On the various aspects of making a living, such as profit and crafts. The conditions that occur in this connection, a number of problems are connected with the subject. So here it's economics. People normally link Khaldun with civilization, with politics, with states, and states craftsmanship, the polity. But again, one part of it is economics. It's good that our economics school refer to this. And I don't know, I've not seen the literature referring to this part of Muqaddimah. Instead of, Prof. Khalid is here. I think you can tell our friends there. Chapter 6, the various kinds of sciences, the methods of instruction, the conditions that obtain in these connections. The chapter includes a prefatory discussion and appendices. Now here, Ibn Khaldun talks about the other sciences. Relate it to our rector, Provost Man's advocacy for the creation of new sciences under the project of Tawhidic epistemology. It's important that when we talk about sciences, the things that we study, they don't descend from heaven. They don't have fixed boundaries and you carry that into your grave. No. The science also, inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. They were born and they die. In other words, they were born and they go back to God. That's it. So again, the sciences are not permanent. They don't have fixed boundaries. And this is what we learn from Ibn Khaldun. Only discovered or only realized by the European French philosophers in the 16th century, by American CIA agents and cohorts of World War II in the 1940s, by the inventors of anthropology, sociology, and economics in the 1800s. That there are no fixed boundaries. Boundaries are fluid. But alhamdulillah, you're here. I think you are the correct people to be here, because ISTAC is not an institute that is obsessed with a fixed boundary in sociology or in the economics. They are fluid. They are fluid and they change and they move and they expand and extend. And then chapter 6. Yeah, chapter 6. Yeah, okay. That's chapter 6. All right. Now, what I'll do is in the next few minutes, I will, let me see. And in this book, you have, these are all by Rosenthal, Ibn Khaldun's life. You have Rosenthal's rendition of the Muqaddimah. and you have the Muqaddimah. The Muqaddimah starts with the invocation by Ibn Khaldun. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, pray, O God, for our Lord Muhammad and his family and the men around him. Okay, and the forward. Now I'll go to the introduction, page 15. I'll read through for well maybe 10 minutes before 4 on what Ibn Khaldun writes. Now this is what Ibn Khaldun says. It should be known that history is a discipline. The first thing that he says. It should be known that history is a discipline that has a great number of, within bracket, different approaches. Its useful aspects are very many. Its goal is distinguished. I think every historian must be here. To many historians in Malaysia, these are Rankian historians. You know, like the German, Herbert von Ranke. I think he was the one who created the modern discipline of history, okay? Saying that history must be based on empirical facts. The positivist history. Without facts, without evidence, there's no history. So that's Rankian history. I'm not saying that you can have history without facts, no, but Rankian history is empirical history. Rankian history does not allow for interpretation, does not allow for speculation, does not allow for revisionism. So most historians, almost all historians in Malaysia are Rankian in their ideology, except maybe one or two. One of my friend Hamidin, he passed away. I was working with him 3 years back. But one important point is that history is a discipline, but we cannot take it as naively as a discipline. Okay? In other words, history is a subject matter that has its own corpus and its own epistemology. When we talk about discipline, we're talking about a corpus, an epistemology, a methodology, a system of assumptions, a system of knowing. History makes us acquainted with the conditions of past nations as they are reflected in their national character. Very important. Yeah? These words are from Ibn Khaldun, not from me, not from Prof. Aziz, not from Rosenthal. Okay? Exactly. Yeah, it makes us acquainted. History makes us acquainted with the conditions of past nations as they are reflected in their national character. It makes us acquainted with the biographies of the prophets and with the rulers and policies of rulers. Is it? No, not the same. Okay. Yeah. This is Khalduddin, power behind the ruler. Yeah. See, one must read again at that time. This was 1500. Machiavelli lived in the 1500. This after Khaldun passed away. I'm not too sure. Khaldun would not have known Machiavelli. The prince, the prince. Machiavelli was born, I think, 100 years after Ibn Khaldun. But Machiavelli would have known Ibn Khaldun. See, these European pundits, they would have discovered Ibn Khaldun right away. I mean, the earlier translators were this one guy, Sylvester de Sacy, French. These were people who enjoyed translating Ibn Khaldun. I'm sure they know. So I'm sure that you have to read. Please tell me. Maybe we can have another reading on Machiavelli. How Machiavelli would have been inspired by Khaldun. Because in Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun talks about the ends and the means. He was part of it. He was part of the ends and the means. That's why I said he was a maverick. Biographies of the prophets and with the dynasties and policies of rulers. He was involved in the crisis in Egypt. He was also he met also Tamerlane, Timur the Leng. I think the grandson or the great-grandson of Genghis Khan in Damascus. So he was quite aware of the intrigues of man and society. And these were modern. These were not during Greek times. These were in modern time. Again, you have to think of the definition of the modern age. When would the modern start? Okay? I mean, these are questions that we can discuss and debate. Some people say that the modernity and the modern age began in the 1900s, some 1800s. Some, the European Enlightenment, they say in the 1600s. Some, Naqib al-Atas said Hamzah Fansuri was a modern man. So again, how do we strike back? What is modernity and what is post-modernity, whatever? This is important in terms of how we periodize our study. Whoever so desires may thus achieve the useful result of being able to imitate historical examples in religious and worldly matters. So here he makes a distinction between religious matters and worldly matters. I would assume that religious would refer to theological things, and worldly would refer to secular political matters. And then the second paragraph or third paragraph, he says, the writing of history, writing of history is within brackets, requires numerous sources and greatly varied knowledge. It also requires a good speculative mind and thoroughness. Good speculative mind and thoroughness. This is what we should have. All students must have a speculative mind, not a docile mind. I'm talking to all, including scholars also. Okay? If you have a docile mind, you cannot study, you cannot progress. Speculative here doesn't mean that you think in terms of wild thinking without any principles. What we call, I think, discursive in modern language, a discursive approach. What is discursive? Recently, I was marking a thesis, I was examining a thesis written by one of our students. My comment is that this thesis is not discursive. So, again, being discursive is an important feature in scholarship. Okay? You can find out what it means. So, good speculative mind and thoroughness, and the possession of these two qualities leads the historian to the truth and keeps him from slips and errors. Ibn Khaldun has, I think, several parts of Muqaddimah talks about errors, kesilapan in the arrival, the reception of information. So this keeps us from slips and errors. If he trusts historical information in its plain transmitted form and has no clear knowledge of the principles resulting from custom, the fundamental facts of politics, the nature of civilization, or the conditions governing human social organization, and if furthermore he does not evaluate remote or ancient material through comparison with near or contemporary material, he often cannot avoid stumbling and slipping and deviating from the high road of truth. What it means is that here Ibn Khaldun mentioned that one has to be aware of the custom, the ways of doing things, the manner in which people do, facts of politics, nature of civilization, conditions of governing human social organization, the environment. So the information that we receive is dependent upon these contexts, and is dependent this context in light of the arrival, in light of the source of the information, and this context in terms of the reception of the information. So information is, what he said, is can also be seen in a contextualized manner. Okay? And we have to look at the context of the information in order to get at the truth. Simple example. It was Hamas who caused this catastrophe. What's the context? It's not October 7. It's May 18, 1948, or earlier, or the Balfour Agreement, or the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Yeah? 1902, Sykes-Picot. Huh? Before Abdul Hamid. Before Sykes-Picot. Okay. So again, we have to look at the context. Then only we'll understand what's happening in Gaza. I'll finish this paragraph, and then you can take a breather. Historians, Quran commentators, and leading transmitters have committed frequent errors in the stories and events they reported. They accepted them in the plain transmitted form without regard for its value. This is fundamental, not only for us, but also for institutions that receive and produce knowledge, especially the media, for example. Disregarding the value of the information that we have. And the Western media is famous for that. Reuters, ABC, CNN, they disregard those values. They did not check them with the principles underlying such historical situations. It's without context, it's without taking into account historical circumstances. Nor did they compare them with similar material. Also, they did not probe more deeply with the yardstick of philosophy, with the help of knowledge of the nature of things, or with the help of speculation and historical insight. Therefore, they strayed from the truth and found themselves lost in the desert of baseless assumptions and errors. The use of the word desert is because Ibn Khaldun was writing in a desert environment. Had Ibn Khaldun were writing in somewhere in Riau, Pulau Penyengat, or Pulau Bintan, he would say that lost in the oceanic or sea environment of baseless assumptions. This is especially in case with figures, either of sums or of money or soldiers, whenever they occur in stories. They offer a good opportunity for false information. And constitute a vehicle for nonsensical statements. They must be controlled and checked with the help of known fundamental facts. So this is until page 16 of the Muqaddimah, starting with the introduction. And next statement, which I will continue in the next session, next month. Ibn Khaldun cites Al-Mas'udi. Al-Mas'udi is a historian during his time. And Al-Mas'udi is an important historian. And he also talks about the Persians and the Israelis and how they commit errors. So I will end here. I hope, inshallah, we'll continue from where we stop, and we'll proceed as soon as we can. I think we have about maybe 5 or 10 minutes. We open for comments or questions based on what I've gone through with you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Murad. I think that's really a very good start to start doing orientation of our mind on the readings of Islamic scholarship. It's like a reading text of our scholars and ulama and trying to assess, evaluate, interpret their ideas and see the relevance of their ideas to our own time here, and also establish how these great minds developed this scholarship. You know, when you talk about Ibn Khaldun, he introduced Ilm al-Umran, the science of human association. What is human association? Is the Ulumu Tamadun, the sciences of Tamadun, as we know them, hari ini, now. You know, you talk about anthropology, you talk about geography, you talk about social science, economics, law, culture, civilization. You find Ibn Khaldun there. How this mind created this system of thinking, this approach to thinking. As Prof. Murad said, he started actually his work by asking the question, what is history? What is history? Tarikh. What is the definition of history? Is just hikayat, telling the information of the nations, of the people, of the buildings, of the history? And he ended up saying that history is not that. History is the ilmul umran, the sciences of building civilization and building life, how societies, how civilization rise and fall. And when you talk about a civilization, of course, you talk about everything. Politics, economy, family, ilm. Later on, I think we will expand into this. So this is a start for our scholars and researchers to read the text in their own original language and see their relevance to our time. So I open for our people here to, if you have any direct question or any direct, let's say, idea on how to go about it in the future, because myself, I see maybe 6 months from now, student, you read the text in front of the people here, and we go into deep critical assessment of what Ibn Khaldun says and what is left still relevant and what is not relevant anymore. Here it's about, at ISTEC here, it's about critical minds. It's not about emotional, it's not about just describing. We need to create that critical mind in the Islamic thought and civilization. That's why we really read together, like he read to us the definition of history and how Ibn Khaldun developed history to become a source for ibra. He said the book is title is Al-Ibar. You know what is Al-Ibar? Al-Ibar means learning lessons, learning wisdom. What is the wisdom of history? And later on, you go deeper, you understand that to Ibn Khaldun, history is how the laws of Allah, the sunan of Allah, translated into culture, into governance, it's all about the science of sunan, how history is governed by laws and pattern. It's not something that we just tell. So I think from this spirit, of what Prof. Murad mentions, please, it's open for you to give your comments or questions. And I think that's a great journey to start. And hopefully 3 years from now, you become all great readers of the books. Because after Ibn Khaldun, we go to Al-Farabi. After Al-Farabi, we go to Al-Ghazali. Ghazali is a spiritual mind. Ibn Khaldun is a sociologist mind. Shatibi is a legal mind. So you build your scholarship. This is our intention, why we are introducing these things.
The different scholars will, I hope, inshallah, will go through different scholars from ISTEC will go through different thinkers. In my case, Ibn Khaldun, Al-Biruni, and Said Naqib Al-Atas, the book Islam and Secularism needs a reading, and perhaps Hamza Fansuri. But I was hoping that those who are well versed in Hamza Fansuri, in Al-Ghazali, in Al-Farabi, we know we have scholars here. They will go through the readings.
Inshallah. Go ahead. Let's see.
Yes, let the ball rolling. They are all thinking about questions. So one observation and one simple question to Prof. The observation is that I think, okay, the observation is that now I hear Dato says about anti-civilization, they are going into that problem. But in the modern day, the greatest period of economic revivalism in US was the Republican leader, Ronald Reagan. And his period was the best in the modern time for the US. And you know what? He used to carry the Muqaddimah with him. During traveling, he reads the Muqaddimah. So he learns the lesson actually for how to make American society to revive back. So that was his reference. My question to you simply, why did he term the book Muqaddimah? Why not anything else?
The Muqaddimah is a very huge, complex corpus that the West have greatly acknowledged. The only thing is they didn't want to admit that they have acknowledged Muqaddimah. Similarly with Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd. Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd, their texts are used in the West as late as recent as the 19th century. So again, they acknowledge it, and we read Kissinger. He passed away, but his writing is in tomes. And if you read his thesis on history, Kissinger, his BA thesis, he cites these people. He cites Ibn Khaldun. So this shows that there is no similar corpus in the West. What they have before 1500 were the Greeks. Was Plato and Aristotle, or they had Homer. Homer was not a historian. Homer was a chronicler of Iliad and so on. So yeah, they read the Greek tragedies. But Ibn Khaldun was actually the earliest scholar in modern times to look into modern ways of society, to have develop modern methods of studying society, because the moment was the 15th century. 14th century, 14th and 15th century. So 14th, 15th century was as the cusp of modernity as such. And to Europeans, they were very conscious of that particular moment, because that moment defined what they are now, the 15th, 16th century, especially the 16th, 17th century Enlightenment. So Ibn Khaldun was an early, I won't use the word proto, please. I'm not going to use the word proto-sociologist or proto-social scientist. He is an early, in fact, he is a modern sociologist, a modern advocate of the Enlightenment. Europe is clever because they have used the word Enlightenment without any description. It's the Enlightenment. Actually, no, it's the European Enlightenment, not the Enlightenment. In fact, global Enlightenment in terms of assessing and making sense of history comes from Ibn Khaldun. So they know that.
Okay, maybe I can just add one footnote to what Prof. Murad mentioned about the Muqaddimah. You know, Ibn Khaldun wrote the book of Tarikh Ibn Khaldun, the history of Ibn Khaldun, Diwan al-Ibar, and he talked about Arabs, about non-Arabs, and around 6-7 volumes. And then he wants to write an introduction. Usually when you write your book or your thesis, the Muqaddimah comes in the end. You write the Muqaddimah, means your introduction of your work. You write the Muqaddimah. Ibn Khaldun, he finished the book of Al-Ibar, Tarikh, very huge, talks about nations, about people. Then he wants to write the Muqaddimah. He took 4 years to write the Muqaddimah. You people, when you write your Muqaddimah, maybe 1 hour with ChatGPT now, no need to write. You just tell him, he will give you the Muqaddimah and choose. He wrote, you know, the introduction of Ibn Khaldun becomes a very huge book. He wrote it actually in Algeria. Ibn Khaldun is from Tunisia. He wrote it in one castle in Algeria. Until today, you go to one of our cities in Algeria is Tilimsan. In Tilimsan, he wrote the Muqaddimah, and that Muqaddimah becomes علم العمران, the science of human association. So that's the story of why he put it that way. The Muqaddimah becomes like the philosophy and the wisdom of the science of history, in which he summarized his approach, his methodology, and his big ideas on how to construct ilmu, or the science of Umrah. So I think that's just a footnote to what Prof. Murad mentioned. Okay, let's see if you have any. Go ahead, Ustaz.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to verify that, because when you ask, why is it called Muqaddimah? You mentioned about the Kitab Al-Ibrar, Okay, I just had a quick reading just now. It said the Kitab Al-Ibrar is 17 volumes, each about 500 pages. So in terms of that, this is 3 volumes, it is Muqaddimah. It is a small portion of a larger work, but yet it contains the gist of a lot of it. Okay, my question is, for his reference, because he studied civilizations and basically how civilizations rise and fall, what was his what civilization was his earliest reference? And, this is probably ahead of the whole thing, but maybe in a summation, because of civilization, what was the earliest civilization he studied? Yeah. And what was his, a quick summation of the reason for the rise and fall of civilization? Okay, that's one question. 2 questions actually.
I just put footnote.
No, I think because it's in Algeria.
Yeah, your question is very difficult, In fact, Ibn Khaldun, if you read the history and you read the Muqaddimah, he's a great reader of the material of his time. Whether in fact, when he introduced the Ilm al-Umran, later on we can see this, he say, I discovered something which was not there before. And I feel like it's a new thing. And he said, I didn't come across of this type of ilm al-Umran in other writings, or in other, like al-Mas'udi or al-Maqrizi, or all the Ibn al-Khatib, all the people who were during his time and before. And of course, Ibn Khaldun also is well acquainted with tafsir al-Quran, with all these ulama before him. If you check his resources, it's even he refers to Greek, to Plato, to Aristotle, to all these ulama. Means he is like a polymath, kind of a scholar who reads history. So he referred to the Muslim historians before him, Maqrizi, Mas'udi, and all this, and he started discovering the discrepancies in their understanding and methodology of history. From there, he developed his idea of history, and he said, I discovered a new ilm which I haven't came across before. Look at his methodology, look at his objectivity. He say, maybe I feel now it's new, but maybe ulama and hukama of humanity discovered it before, but I didn't reach those books, or I didn't see those books. So that's his objectivity. I got something new, but maybe some other people could have done it, but we haven't received it yet. So from this perspective, I think Ibn Khaldun, I can say that his sources of the study of history are really multi, from Islamic, from non-Islamic, from Greek, from all parts. Just you read the Muqaddimah and you read the text in history, you will find like he is really talking about many historical information. For your information, I will tell you later on when my time comes that one of the Algerian scholars also, who is Malik bin Nabi, later on he criticized Ibn Khaldun and in his methodology. And he said that one of the issues of Ibn Khaldun, he studied history of Arab, of non-Arab, on this, but in a limited scope or unit of analysis. That's why I'm saying this. Please, people, when you study scholars, historians, and people, don't take them like sacred texts. It's only the Quran and Sunnah that you need to really take. The rest all is human thought, Islamic thought and civilization. So we take and give. I think from this perspective, I maybe later on we will answer your question in details with texts. We read which paragraph says this, which paragraph says that. That's the researchers. That's how we deal with history. Go ahead, the last question, I think. Okay.
Yeah, to add to Prof. Aziz, Ibn Khaldun read what happened in the known world, the past of the known world. He mentioned Persian, he mentioned Greek, he mentioned Arab, he mentioned Chinese and Indian civilization. He mentioned those past civilizations. So one of his methodologies we would describe as historical. But what I think attracted the Europeans was his empirical way of observation, looking at the Badawi and as his lab, the empirical observation in terms of their behavior. So that's how he discovered the Asabiyah. That's how he discovered how individuals become tribes, become organizations, become nations, and how those nations later evolve into another form. So it transforms. So the rise and fall of civilization. That is the common way of looking at Ibn Khaldun. But how he arrived at that is a combination of the historical observation and the empirical. You see, when you talk about empirical, he lived among the Bedouins. He lived among the Asabiyah people that he said, but at the same time, he was not part of them. He was critical of the Asabiyah. He was critical of his clansmen, but he was inside that system. So when you talk about empiricism, he was not a positivist sociologist. We are criticizing positivism, but he participates. A positivist does not participate in the phenomenon, the object of study, but he participates. That's why I think some of the Europeans they see Ibn Khaldun as beyond positivism, not like Auguste Comte. No, the ideology that was developed in Europe to be positivist in one's way, so that one cannot be involved in one study. But he was involved. He was involved deeply until I said he went to jail. He was how many times he was almost killed? We don't know.
Yeah. In fact, one time he worked like a prime minister.
Yeah.
And then Qadi al-Qudat in Egypt.
Yeah.
And a minister and advisor to the rulers. If you see, he's really, really empirical, really in real life, and he sees how states rise and fall, and how dynasty, how money, how economics, how influence the movement of societies. So I think in the future you can learn more about his ideas. Okay, we should have our last. Okay.
Sir, what was the reaction of the scholars at his time regarding his book? Did they criticize, or did they didn't really pay attention to him? And also my second question is,
yeah, I think the first question we'll need years to answer.
The second is, if Ibn Khaldun had these concepts or modern concepts, will he reach the same conclusions?
Had he?
If Ibn Khaldun had modern concepts, or he was at our time, would he reach the same conclusions?
Well, the what if question is quite difficult. But from our perspective, or how we resonate, he was using modern concepts. He was using modern concepts of studying society. That's the important thing. Only Europe realized about 400 years later, in the 1700s. So Europe took it as modern, whereas the modernity was really there 500 years ago. And to the question on what his contemporaries think, I have not come across any Arab scholars criticizing or responding to Ibn Khaldun, but I've come across the later 100 or 200 years European scholars, and they were critical in a positive way, especially those the French scholars, the early French translators. Sylvestre de Sacy was the first French translator, and then the Mamluk translator in Egypt a bit earlier. So I think closing remarks?
Another footnote, just very simple one. For the contemporary, Ibn Khaldun was having also many enemies because of his involvement in politics, in governments, inciting. If you study his history, we'll see a phenomenon, a very different human being. He will side this dynasty, and then when things goes down, he will go to another one, he will go to another one, and then he go back to the other one, then put it. It's like a kind of, you need to read it. Now, during his time, there was another great scholar. His name is Ibn Khatib. Ibn Khatib is a great scholar also who got ideas of going out of the box, not like the normal things. Now, during his time, there are many enemies, and actually, Ibn Khaldun, unfortunately, come in a period of time where the Islamic civilization is in decline. In fact, his book, Ulm al-Umran, supposed to revive the Ummah, supposed to revive. But during his time, the Muwahhidin time, the Murabitin, the Qaramita, all the Ummah was, no one will care about Ibn Khaldun at that time. If you really study what happened in the political disunity, the fall of dynasties, the struggle, the power struggle among Muslims themselves in Al-Andalus, in Egypt, in all, then the Ummah was not actually at that level of understanding what this man is saying and to go and absorb and revive. That's the situation with Ibn Khaldun. That's why, as Prof. Murad said rightly, Ibn Khaldun actually was discovered by the Western people and reintroduced to the Ummah through the West, not within our own, even though his book is actually reviving the Ummah by building the new sciences of civilization. It's like the book of Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. You know what is the book of Abu Hamid al-Ghazali? Ihya Ulumuddin, reviving the religious sciences of the Ummah, because during his time also, the 4th century, the Ummah also start having a lot of challenges with the Mongol. There are many things for you to learn so that you appreciate. This is my comment to you, but this, you are actually studying a great text of the Ummah, a great mind. And your question regarding the relevance of his terms, until today, most of the terms developed by Ibn Khaldun, we consume them, we use them in social science and human science. For example, he is the first in the Islamic history to talk about the idea of cyclical movement of civilization, that dynasties and states, they start, they develop, they go to the peak, they start declining. That's what they call cycle of civilization in sociology. That's, and so on and so on. They talk about, he talk about what we call this one, the sana'i'. Sana'i' means professions, competencies. He talk about the malakat, the competencies which we have now, the competency of thinking, of creativity, of AI, of this. Ibn Khaldun talk about these competencies during that time. So that's the greatness of Ibn Khaldun. Okay?
And economists talk about cyclical theory. So economists, the field of economics, the discipline of economics, borrow from Ibn Khaldun. So this is important in terms of how the disciplines borrow. Also, it's important to look into systems thinking. I think many of you should be engaged in systems thinking. Ibn Khaldun is a systems thinker, a systems philosopher. Similar to Naqib al-Atas. You can see the resonance, actually. And systems thinking and the corpus of systems thinking is very important for graduate work in terms of how you look into the origins of systems, what we mean by systems abstractly, conceptually, and what we call the hierarchy, the maratib and the tajalli. The maratib, the hierarchy, and the tajalli, the manifestation. So this is systems thinking. And I'm not saying that Ibn Khaldun is the first, but he manifests that systems thinking in this corpus. So I think with that,
History before Ibn Khaldun history was written in with religious sentiment, or just purely like a secular form for him to write in that way? Mm.
Yeah.
It is, we have to distinguish between history and chronicle. So history was written in a chronicle manner, a chronicler. So those who write what we think of history, what we read as history, actually are chronicles. Homer's Iliad was a chronicle, for example, and those from Chinese in his relation, they write chronicles. They do not write history. And this way, I think, in the present context of Malaysia, historians they deny our position to talk about history. Actually, we chronicleize. We do not talk about history. History has its own techniques. So again, this is what, and Ibn Khaldun was departed from that tradition of chronicling events.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, in fact, if you read his in the Muqaddimah, he will explain to you the question.
Yeah.
He said that he found that history before, he's just narrating events, what happened to this dynasty, what happened to these people and this. But he says they don't discover the illah, the reason, the laws, the wisdom, the maqasid, why this happened, what is the law that govern history, what is the law. From there, he developed his approach of ibar and wisdom. Anyway, I think it's really...
Can I just, to do justice to what he said in his work, I think in subsequent sessions, we'll come across this. But what he says is that God knows and you do not know. This is from Ibn Khaldun, talking about history. Reasons why things happen. So, thank you. I think, Prozi, you want closing remarks? Yeah. Thank you very much.
I think I saw, if you allow Prof. Murad, there is one brother, he come all the way from the US. Our brother there is a medical doctor, and he's going to do PhD in ISTAC here. And he heard about you and about ISTAC, and he was impressed. And alhamdulillah, he come first day here with Ibn Khaldun and Prof. Murad, the Malaysian Ibn Khaldun. So it's a great thing. Let me see what they want to tell us. Go ahead.
Yes, Assalamualaikum. Thank you very much, Dr. Aziz Barghouth and respected speaker. This is Dr. Bilal Piracha. I am an assistant professor in emergency medicine. And my throat is not in the right way of traveling. Mashallah, very impressive about the conference. And thank you, sister, for inviting. Sorry, I just reached at the end. So few thoughts with the discussion of the questions about the fall and rise of the civilizations and clash of civilizations. So that reminded me of a verse of Allama Muhammad Iqbal. As most of you will know him, he was the PhD in the Persian his history and all that. So he said a verse, तुम्हारी तहजीब, I will say in Urdu and then a translation, तुम्हारी तहजीब अपने खंजर से आप खुदकुशी करेगी, शाख नाजुक पे जो आशियां बनेगा नापायदार होगा, which means that your civilization will commit suicide with your own dagger, because a nest built on a fragile branch will not endure. And that's what we are seeing today, the fall of the civilization which had its peak. So that will do it. But the question which it is, that as Imam Maududi said, that one day the humanity will be amazed that these are the people who were the torch bearers of the solutions for the humanity, but where were they when we needed them? So are we ready today to provide to the world the systems or the frameworks in our in education, in health, in law, which can literally change the shape of the humanity? And are we ready to give our own Ibn Khaldun of today? Thank you very much.
Inshallah. Thank you, brother. Your Highness, Prof. Murad, our professors, our doctors, our people on the Zoom there, and also in the YouTube channel. I think that's something great to start at ISTAC here. Alhamdulillah, we thank Professor Murad for this very important lecture. And I think many things to come in the future to deepen your understanding, your intellectuality, your scholarship, and you see how your scholars in history have made great contributions to the Ummah. We really need to appreciate what they did, and we see what is relevant today, and we benefit from it. I think with this, we end our session today with the, of course, reading Surah Al-Asr. And also, I would like to seek the permission of Her Highness and all of you to have a group photo here, because we are recording history, but not Ibn Khaldun history, but recording the history of ISTAC here, and your presence all here, and especially Your Highness with us all here. I think that's maybe 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you will look for this video and for this photo. Inshallah. Thank you very much, everyone. Your Highness, you want to say something? Sure, sure. For Your Highness, any words of wisdom from your side in what we are doing and starting in this? Please, Your Highness.
Actually, someone mentioned ChatGPT there, so I quickly went to ChatGPT, honestly, and I sent it to him. He said, please tell me what you tell me.
Your Highness. Okay.
Somebody at the other end, they mentioned ChatGPT. Which one, you? Oh, Ahmad, my classmate. So I asked him, please tell me about Ibn Khaldun. He said, certainly, he said. And then he went down there and he said, would you like a quote from the Muqaddimah or a summary of his views on a specific topic like governance or education? And I just write, yes, please. I get everything I sent to him already. Yeah, he said on governance, he says, dynasties do not last beyond 3 generations. I think mine has lasted, right?
Dynasty.
Many days. Okay.
Yes.
And on society and social cohesion, he answered the strength of the dynasty rests on the group's solidarity. On economics and taxation, it says, at the beginning of the dynasty, taxation yields a large revenue from small assessments. At the end of the dynasty, the taxation yields a small revenue from large. I don't understand that. On urban civilizations, sedentary culture is a goal of civilization. And then on education, this one is what we are talking about today, right? This is education today. Teaching should be gradual, not all at once. It's a year? It's a year?
Yeah.
It's a year, right? There's 3 books. Have you read the book? Have you read all?
Yes.
Oh, wow. I'm just reading the chapter invocation only. All right.
Wow.
And on history, it says history is a science. It informs us about the conditions of past nations and legacy in one line, and so all that. And then he asked me again, I can also provide a short story style summary on the Muqaddimah or tailor this for a speech or an article. Do you want that? I can send to you. Yeah, but it's right. He wrote that the rise and fall of a city, a story through Ibn Khaldun's eyes. He wrote that. What else did he write? Yeah, that's all.
It's happening now.
Yeah, he wrote that. That's what. Well, see, ChatGPT knows your mind. He calls me Tuanku now. He knows I'm Tengku Ampuan. He called me, yes. He said, you're doing a great thing, blah, 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 on that, everything. All I asked him about was, because I was in Singapore. I just came back from Singapore. We're working with Temasek Foundation on the first 1,000 days of a child's life. But I brought the suspect group from your A Kuantan. So while we are doing this part with Temasek Foundation, they're going to sponsor us. I said, I want to do with your A, let's do the first 44 weeks of the child's life in the womb, which is more important because you want a healthy child. So our project will be called From Womb to World. Yes. So I had a good talk with signing the MOU. Yeah. So that can be my thesis.
Yeah.
From womb to world.
Yeah, from womb to world. So they took us to see what they're doing in Kandang Kerbau. and also the milk bank project that they do. And I say we're also doing it in Suspect. And then they took us to the mosque. The mosque is a huge community in Singapore. It's really, because unlike Malaysia where everything is government pays, you're paid by the government, you have a salary all. There is volunteerism. And there's a project Arif at the mosque. Very interesting. So we're going to incorporate that with Masjid Gami Islam Pahang. And we're bringing the project Menara Gading as well, which is, I don't know whether you all know that my husband and I, for the last 20 years, we have this project Menara Gading, which we work with UKM, but now it's with UMP. Instead of giving scholarships to the cleverest student in class, like you all, so we give it to the non-performing student, yang bodoh sikit kan? Yeah, to the non-performing student from Form 4, we look out for them in Form 3, and Form 4 and Form 5, we guide them, we give them counseling, we give them everything. They're the non-performing students that you wouldn't think they would be able to achieve anything in life. Trust me, 1,500 have gone to universities. So that's what we do. Don't take the cleverest. So I'm the non-performing one here. So I need the counseling and the guidance, everything. So I mentioned that to Temasek Foundation as well, and they want to work with us on that. So they want to work with me on the 3 projects. So that's all I can say today.
Yeah. Thank you, Your
But
Highness.
Ibn Khaldun, I already downloaded the whole 3 books on
MashaAllah.
PDF here.
Anyone else downloaded? You see the difference? Okay. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Highness.
very
Thank
much.
you, everyone. May Allah bless you for this time, for your attendance. All this in your, inshallah, will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.